Elara had always believed that if a relationship was truly strong, it would not break with a bang. It would not arrive through a slap, a shouted insult, or a tearful scene in the kitchen at 2 in the morning. It would die the way things that have lived a long time often die. Quietly, slowly, like a room losing oxygen little by little while the person inside doesn't realize it until breathing starts to hurt. Back then, she had never really understood that. Back then, she believed what she had with Nathan had already moved past the fragile stage. It no longer needed to be proved with goodnight texts, weekend flowers, or long vows. It had become a rhythm of living, something so steady that people stop looking at it. Only when it cracks do they hear the sound. The first time Elara met Nathan was at an indie film screening on the 3rd floor of a small art space. The kind with mismatched chairs, overactive air conditioning, and speakers that buzzed now, and then like they were trying to whisper a secret through a damaged throat. The movie that night wasn't very good, but the conversations after the lights came back on were much better. Elara was standing by the drinks table, holding a glass of water, typing a few notes into her phone when she heard someone beside her say, "The ending of that film was cowardly." She looked up. The man was tall, his shoulders a little sloped, wearing a rolled-sleeve shirt, his hair messy in the way of someone who had spent the whole day thinking and forgotten to check a mirror. He wasn't trying to be charming, wasn't asking some smooth opening question. He just said it the way people continue a conversation they've already been having with themselves. Elara slipped her phone away. "Not cowardly, avoidant." He tilted his head at her. "There's a difference." "There is. Cowardly is knowing you're too afraid to do something. Avoidant is pretending there was another option." He laughed. "I like the way you talk. I'm not talking so you'll like it. That makes it even better." He held out his hand. "Nathan." "Elara, do you work in film?" "I edit films." Nathan nodded as if that explained something he had just realized. "That makes sense. And you, trying to build a company that sounds cooler than it really is." Elara lifted a brow. "So you haven't built it yet?" Nathan smiled. "Do you always talk like this?" "Like what?" "Like you're stripping all the decoration off what people say." Elara looked at him for a moment, then took a sip of water. "If there's nothing underneath, decoration's useless." Nathan fell quiet for 2 seconds. "Give me your number." She laughed then the first time. "Why?" "Because I want to see what else you can tear apart besides movies." "Could be you." He shrugged. "I accept the risk." 2 days later, they got coffee. 3 weeks later, Nathan was appearing in Elara's life more regularly than her work was. 3 months later, she was used to opening her apartment door and finding him sitting on the floor, 2 takeout boxes in front of him, and too many ideas spilling out of his head, too fast to follow. Nathan was the kind of man who entered a room with his energy before he entered with his body. He spoke fast, thought fast, got excited about things that didn't exist yet as if they were already real. He could sit from 11 at night to 1 in the morning explaining a product no one had used yet, a market that might not even exist, a future no one had promised him. And strangely enough, Elara, who mistrusted every story without structure, believed him. Not because of logic, but because underneath all that bravado and restlessness, Nathan had something that made people soften. He was real, or at least at the time, Elara believed he was. There was one night, when they had only been seeing each other for a few months, that Elara was sitting at her computer editing a documentary project for a difficult director. She had been working for 6 hours straight and still could not figure out how to connect 2 scenes. Nathan was behind her, holding a cup of instant noodles that had long gone cold. He knew nothing about editing software, but he stayed because she had never told him to leave. Elara hit pause on the timeline, frustrated. "It's not working. It doesn't flow." Nathan looked at the screen. "Why not?" "Because the emotional motivation doesn't connect." "Say that in human language." Elara rubbed at her eyes. "It means if I cut it in chronological order, it's technically right, but the audience won't feel the fall." Nathan was quiet for a moment, staring at the screen. "Then why don't you build around the fall first? Then let them understand why it happened." Elara turned to look at him. "You don't know this job. I know how to listen to a story, and if you want people to hurt, you have to let them lose something before you explain it." Elara looked at him longer. The sentence was not polished, not technical, but it was right. She turned back to the screen, dragged one of the later sequences to the front, and tried cutting it the way Nathan had suggested. And suddenly the story moved. Everything locked into place, as if all she had needed was someone to remind her that emotion does not move in chronological order. That night when the export finished, Elara turned and saw Nathan asleep on the couch, his neck tilted awkwardly, one hand still holding a plastic fork. She remembered thinking then that this man understood how stories worked, even without belonging to her world. The feeling was not huge, not dramatic, but it was enough to begin something deep. They moved in together after almost a year. There was no trial proposal, no speech about the future. One night Nathan opened the closet, looked at how his shirts had taken over nearly half the space, and said, "I think I've already moved in." Elara was sitting on the bed reading notes, not even looking up. "Yeah, so are you planning to object? If you were going to object, you should have done it 3 weeks ago." Nathan laughed and sat beside her. "I should feel offended that you're not surprised. You left your toothbrush here 3 weeks ago, and you said nothing, because I wanted to see how long you'd keep pretending." Nathan kissed her temple. "You're terrifying. You're still here." "Yes," he murmured, "still here." The first few years were what Elara would later refer to in the gentlest voice inside herself. The time before everything knew it would break. They were not perfect. Nathan was reckless with work. Elara shut down too much when she was tired. There were weeks when she wanted silence, and Nathan talked non-stop to fight off his fear of failing. There were months when Nathan sank under startup pressure, and Elara quietly carried most of the bills without bringing it up. They fought about dishes, about noise, about the way Nathan promised too easily and followed through too slowly, about how Elara turned every emotion into silence until it felt like a wall. But even at their worst, they still had one thing: they came back. Nathan could forget to buy milk 3 times in a row, but he remembered exactly how much Elara hated the sound of a spoon hitting ceramic first thing in the morning. Elara could disappear into editing for 10 hours and forget to eat, but she always left Nathan a warm plate if he came home late. Those things were so small no one would call them love. But truthfully, most love lives in things that small. There was one time Nathan lost a large amount of money because he trusted the wrong partner. He came home very late that night and sat in the kitchen without turning the light on. Elara stepped out of the workroom and saw him there in the dark. "Why aren't you turning on the light?" Nathan said nothing. Elara poured a glass of water and set it in front of him. "How much did you lose?" Nathan looked up, surprised. "How did you know I lost money?" "Because if you were only tired, you'd talk more. When you go this quiet, it means something bad happened." Nathan gave a dry laugh. Then he told her the number. Elara leaned against the counter and inhaled. "That hurts." "I know. What are you going to do next?" "You're not going to yell at me." Elara looked at him. "Would yelling bring the money back?" Nathan shook his head. "Then I'll yell later. Right now, tell me, where did you go wrong?" Nathan looked up at her for a long time, his eyes red but not quite from crying. "Maybe from exhaustion. I trusted someone just because they said exactly what I wanted to hear." Elara nodded. "The next time, don't trust anything that sounds too convenient." Nathan laughed, tired but lighter. "You're cruel in a useful way. Got anything more romantic than that?" Nathan stood up and held her, burying his face in her neck. "I don't know what I'd be without you." At the time, Elara wrapped her arms around him and believed that sentence was true. Looking back, she still believed it had once been true. That was what made everything hurt more. Not because all of it had been fake, but because it had been real once and then rotted. That is the thing that hurts most, not a total lie, but a truth that later became contaminated. Around the 3rd year, Nathan's company started showing real signs of life. A small funding round came through. A proper office replaced the co-working space. Investor meetings multiplied. Celebration dinners followed. Interview requests started coming in. Nathan began moving faster, talking faster, bringing home that sharp, electrified light that lives in people who have just touched a version of the future they once only dared to imagine. "I think this time it's real," he said one evening as he took off his coat, standing in the middle of the living room as if he were still on a stage. Elara was slicing fruit. "You always think it's real." "No, this time it's different." "How?" Nathan crossed the room and stole a slice of apple from her hand. "Different because I don't feel like I'm pretending to be an adult anymore." Elara looked at him, then smiled. "Congratulations." He wrapped his arms around her waist. "You're not happy for me." "I am." "You don't look like it." Elara set the knife down. "I'm happy. I just know the higher it goes, the heavier it gets." Nathan kissed her hair. "You always see the price before the light, because you always see the light before the price." Nathan smiled. "That's why we need each other." At the time, she still believed that too. But success brought other things. Not just pressure, not just money. It brought a world where Nathan was suddenly seen by more people, by different kinds of people. Young, sharp, ambitious people who spoke as if everything was possible if you were reckless enough. Elara was never jealous of his work. She understood ambition. She had loved part of him for it, but she began to notice something vague and unsettling. Nathan was not only changing his rhythm of life, he was changing the way he inhabited. He began dressing more carefully, for things that used to require only a regular shirt. He started carrying his phone even when he walked to the kitchen for water. He smiled at his screen more than he smiled at her. If she listed those things aloud, they would sound petty. If she complained, she would look paranoid. Elara knew that. She hated suspicion without evidence. She hated the feeling of turning into a lesser version of herself because of a hunch. So she said nothing. She watched. One Wednesday night, Nathan came home later than usual. Not extremely late, just late enough for dinner to go cold, and for the smell of food in the kitchen to turn into that stale in-between state that always felt faintly sad. Elara was still at the table, laptop open, though she had stopped getting any real work done a while ago. Nathan stepped in, took off his watch, set his phone on the table, then immediately picked it back up as if he had forgotten something. Sorry, the meeting ran long. Elara looked up. Did you eat? Yeah, I ate with the team. Okay. Nathan stood there for a second. You're not going to ask what meeting it was. Elara closed the laptop. Do I need to? He smiled a little, but it faltered in the middle. You're less curious about me these days. Elara looked at him. Or maybe you tell me less of what's actually true. Nathan paused. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. No, you just said something. Elara pulled her chair back and stood. I said it's nothing. Nathan placed the phone down harder than necessary. Elara, I do not have the energy for these mind games. She turned to look at him, her eyes calm enough to feel cold. Neither do I. They both went quiet. Nathan stepped out to the balcony to smoke, a habit he had quit almost 2 years earlier but still returned to now, and then when he was under stress. Elara stood in the kitchen, watching his silhouette through the glass. That was the first moment she thought maybe she was standing in front of a change she could not yet name, but one large enough to pull everything off its old track. A few weeks later, a new project landed in her lap. A short documentary about the rising startup wave, the young founders, the faces being framed as the future of creativity. ND Tech. The director was someone she had worked with for years, someone who trusted her enough to hand over the entire post-production process. And perversely enough, the film included Nathan and his company as one of its central subjects. They want an inside perspective, the director said over the phone. Nathan's good on camera. He has energy. He has a story. Elara went quiet for 2 seconds. Don't you think that's a little sensitive? Because he's your boyfriend. Yeah, you're the best editor for this project. Besides, you're not the kind of person who mixes personal life with work. Elara stared at the empty screen in front of her. Yeah, I'm not. When the first hard drives arrived, she still thought she could do it. So what if Nathan was in the footage? At worst, she would see more of him than usual, hear him say things she had already heard at home. Maybe it would feel strange, maybe a little uncomfortable, but nothing more. She had no way of knowing that some truths do not come in through the front door. They enter a life through something colder. Raw video files, timestamps, uncleaned audio, moments a camera captures when no one thinks they are still being observed. The night she saw the first sign, Nathan was not coming home. The text arrived at 11:17 p.m. I'm staying at the office. Early investor meeting tomorrow. Sleep without me. Elara looked at the message, then set the phone face down on the desk. She wasn't angry. Not then. She was only tired. A hollow kind of tired. She turned back to the screen and opened a footage folder labeled Day 4 Office B-roll/corridor/after hour. The first few clips were ordinary. Staff talking, coffee cups, laughter in the distance. Nathan in one corner of a meeting room, standing by a whiteboard explaining something. Elara watched the way any editor watches, not through emotion, but through rhythm and shot value. Then the camera shifted to a hallway angle, probably because the cameraman was waiting to set up the next scene. The frame was slightly off, not intentionally capturing anyone, but at the far end of the hallway, Nathan stood beside a woman. Young, hair tied low, cream-colored blouse. Elara had seen her once at some networking event, but couldn't immediately place her. Maybe someone from strategy or PR or an investor team. The kind of face everywhere now. Confident, trained to hold eye contact without blinking. Elara paused the video, not because they were standing next to each other, but because the space between them was not the space of colleague. Nathan was saying something, and the woman laughed. Then Nathan bent closer, speaking near her. His hand touched her wrist lightly, naturally, like a reflex that had been repeated enough times to stop needing thought. Elara stared at the screen without blinking. She rewound, watched again, zoomed in, zoomed out. Nothing changed. Her phone vibrated. Nathan was calling. Elara watched the screen ring, let it ring out and die. A minute later, he texted, "Were you asleep?" She replied, "No." "Why didn't you pick up?" "Working." "Get some sleep." Elara stared at those 3 words for a long time. Then she typed, "Okay." She sat for almost an hour after that without doing anything, letting that clip remain frozen on the screen. When she finally shut the computer, she did not cry. She just lay down in bed, stared at the ceiling, and felt something inside her shift from suspicion into knowledge. Nathan came home very early the next morning, showered quickly, then started getting dressed for his meeting. Elara was pouring coffee when he stepped up behind her and wrapped an arm around her waist. "You're up early." "I didn't sleep much." Nathan kissed the back of her neck. "Sorry about staying at the office." When she didn't answer, he asked softly, "Elara." She turned and handed him a mug. "What time is the investor meeting?" 10. Nathan took the mug and looked at her. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. You look tired." Elara kept looking at him. She wanted to ask, "Who is that woman from last night?" Wanted to ask, "What was that touch?" Wanted to ask, "What exactly are you doing to your life?" But she didn't, partly because the evidence was not yet complete, partly because she did not want to hear the first lie spoken in her kitchen on a quiet morning. Nathan frowned. "Are you mad I didn't come home?" Elara shook her head. "No." "Then what is it?" She looked straight at him. "Is there anything you want to tell me?" Nathan faltered for a split second, then recovered too quickly. "Like what?" "I'm asking you." Nathan laughed lightly, a little strained. "No, I'm just busy. These last few weeks have been crazy." Elara nodded. "Right." Nathan waited for her to push, to accuse, to start the fight. But Elara did not. She picked up her own coffee and walked back into the workroom, leaving him in the kitchen with an answer he had not earned, and a silence that had begun to smell different. In the days that followed, she kept watching the footage, partly because it was her job, partly because if she had already come this far, she could not go back by pretending she had not seen anything. She saw Nathan with the woman again during a group lunch shoot. They sat 2 seats apart, no obvious gesture between them. But then the camera caught a moment when Nathan glanced over at her while someone else was talking, and his eyes softened in that way that only happens when people forget they are being watched. Later, in some B-roll shot at the end of the day, Nathan handed her his jacket when she said she was cold. A simple gesture, too simple, but Nathan had never been the kind of man who offered softness casually, not unless he wanted something. Elara started saving those clips into a separate folder. No name, just dates and times, as if giving it structure would make it feel less like her life. One night, Nathan was sitting on the couch when his phone lit up. He looked down and smiled. The smile was brief but enough. "What's funny?" Elara asked, eyes still on her laptop. Nathan glanced up. "What?" "Oh, nothing. Nothing that makes you smile. Just a meme in the group chat." "Show me." Nathan paused for a beat too short for anyone else to catch, but Elara did. "It's gone already." Elara turned to look at him. "That fast?" He shrugged. "Yeah." She nodded. "Yeah." Nathan turned the phone face down. The rooms thickened. The TV was on, some cooking show neither of them was watching, but the sound filled the space where conversation used to live. Eventually, Nathan spoke. "You've been weird lately." Elara shut the laptop. "How?" "Distant, like you're here but not really here." She looked at him. "That sounds familiar." "How?" "Nothing." Nathan leaned forward, elbows on knees. "If something's wrong, say it. I can't guess." Elara gave a faint smile that wasn't really a smile. "Really? What does that mean?" "Nothing." Nathan exhaled hard. "Elara, I'm tired." "I know." "Then don't make everything harder than it already is." That landed in some cold place inside her. Don't make everything harder, as if the hard thing here was her silence, not whatever he was hiding. Elara stood. "I'm going to bed." Nathan caught her wrist. "There, again, you walk out of every conversation." Elara looked down at his hand on her wrist. That touch pulled her straight back to the footage. Same hand, same contact point. Casual, thoughtless. She pulled away gently. Some conversations start with lies. They're not worth staying for. Nathan frowned. "Are you accusing me of something?" Elara held his gaze for a few seconds. long enough for him to start feeling truly uneasy. Then she said, "I'm not accusing you of anything yet." That sentence silenced him, because what terrifies people most is not when they know they've been found out. It's when they realize the person in front of them still hasn't said everything they know. Instead of confronting him then, Elara did what she was best at: watching, selecting, arranging, understanding the hidden logic underneath behavior. Once she started seeing Nathan that way, she could not go back to seeing him as before. She noticed he had begun using a different voice when replying to certain text. The same man, but two distinct rhythms. When a colleague called, he sounded short and clipped. When a name didn't appear on screen but his face changed anyway, his tone softened, slowed. She noticed he used the same phrase, "I'm busy," for too many situations, until it stopped sounding like an explanation and started sounding like cover. She noticed the tailored shirts he used to wear only for investor meetings were now appearing on days supposedly reserved for regular team dinner. She also noticed herself changing. No more questions, no more waiting, no more instinctively looking up when the elevator opened on her floor. Part of her hurt, yes, but a larger part was turning strange and cold, not because she had stopped loving him overnight, but because loving someone while seeing a truth like this is exhausting work. And the body knows how to cut down what it can in order to survive. One weekend, they had lunch with Nathan's closest friends, Julian and Tess. Julian talked a lot. Tess noticed everything. They were among the few people Elara had always felt comfortable around. The meal passed normally, too normally, to the point that Elara almost found it funny. Nathan laughed in all the right places, pulled out her chair at exactly the right moment, put food onto her plate the way a good partner should. A perfectly smooth performance of devotion, so polished it made her chest ache. Tess looked at Elara over her wine glass. "You look tired." Elara set down her fork, a little. Nathan jumped in instantly. "She's closing out a deadline on a project." Julian laughed. "You two are always on deadline. How do you even live like this?" Nathan raised his glass. "Like people with a future." Elara looked at him. "Or like people running so fast they stop seeing what they're leaving behind." Julian laughed loudly because he thought it was a joke. Tess did not laugh. She looked at Elara more carefully. On the drive home, Nathan said, "Did you really need to take a shot at me in front of my friends?" Elara kept her eyes on the window. "I was talking about both of us." "No, you were talking about me. You're too sensitive." Nathan gripped the steering wheel harder. "So now everything I say or do is a problem." Elara turned back toward him. "If you think there's a problem, maybe that's because you know there is one." Nathan pulled the car over abruptly. "Say it clearly, Elara. What exactly do you think is going on?" The street moved slowly past the window. People crossing, a red light at the intersection, a father holding his child's hand. Everything outside was far too ordinary for a moment like that. Elara looked straight at him. "If I asked you right now, would you tell me the truth?" Nathan did not answer immediately. Just one beat, but it was enough. Elara smiled very faintly. "I understand." Nathan turned sharply toward her. "Understand what?" She opened the car door. "That I don't need to ask." Nathan grabbed her hand. "Don't do this." "Do what?" "This thing where you talk halfway, like you know something but refuse to say it." Elara pulled her hand back. "Because if I say all of it, whatever's left between us dies immediately. I'm just watching how long you'll keep pretending it's still alive." She got out, called a cab, and left Nathan in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel with a face she had never seen before: real fear. That night he did not come home late. He came back almost right after her, and stood in the doorway of her workroom for a long time before saying, "Can you talk to me?" Elara kept her eyes on the screen. "We are talking. Not like this. I don't have another kind right now." Nathan stepped inside. "I don't know what's happening with you." She turned to look at him. "Do you really want me to believe you don't know?" Nathan went still. Elara looked at him for a few seconds, then turned back to the screen. "Go out. Are you punishing me for something?" This time Elara laughed, not loudly, just a thin breath sharpened by something hard. When the guilty person starts asking what they did wrong, I always find that fascinating. Nathan stared at her a few more seconds, then left the room. That night, for the first time in years, they slept in the same bed but fully turned away from each other, like two planets that had slipped out of orbit. More footage kept coming in. The documentary's shape was growing clearer, and so was the real story moving through Elara's life. There was one clip from after a pitch meeting, when the camera had not fully cut. Nathan walked out with that woman, Mina. Elara finally remembered the name when someone called it in another shot. Mina laughed and said something inaudible. Nathan bent to hear her, then touched the small of her back for a brief second. Not long, but long enough to make the gesture intimate. Elara paused the timeline and closed her eyes. A wave of nausea rose in her, not because of jealousy, not in the simple sense, but because she was sitting inside the very profession that had always helped her understand other people. And through it, she was watching the man she loved betray her without even knowing she could see him. Not through gossip, not through suspicion, through raw, unedited truth. There was one night in the middle of all that when Nathan came home drunk. Not blackout drunk, just enough for his control to thin. He sank onto the floor beside the couch, loosened his tie, and looked up at Elara, who was standing in the kitchen. "You're still awake?" "Yeah." Nathan smiled weakly. "You're always awake." Elara poured him water and set it in front of him. He looked at her. "Do you know something? Lately, I keep feeling like you look at me the way you look at a stranger." Elara said nothing. Nathan took the glass, fingers tightening around it. "I know I'm busy. I know I haven't been here enough, but I'm doing all of this for us." That sentence might have reached a different version of her, the version from a few months ago, but not this one. Elara leaned against the counter. "Are you sure it's for us?" Nathan looked up. "What do you mean?" Elara stared at him for a long moment, then asked, "Do you remember the last time we talked about anything other than work?" Nathan frowned, trying to think, then failed. "Do you remember the last time you looked at me without seeming like you'd just stepped in from another life?" "Elara, do you remember what wanting to come home feels like?" Nathan set the glass down too hard. "What do you want me to say? That I'm tired, that I'm being pulled in 100 directions, that everything at the company is life or death for the next few months?" Elara nodded. "No, I want you to tell the truth." Nathan stood up, unsteady from the alcohol. "I am telling the truth." Elara looked into his eyes. "No, Nathan, you're choosing the most convenient parts of the truth." The room fell silent. Nathan opened his mouth as if to say something, but then only shook his head and went to the bathroom. That night, Elara stayed in the workroom until dawn. Not editing, not crying, just sitting with the screen lit, and a cold kind of clarity growing inside her. When the edit entered its final phase, Elara made a decision she would later recognize as the point of no return. She told no one. It was not a decision to expose him, not a decision to destroy him. Only this: she would not protect Nathan. She would not cut the sensitive moments just because they would make him uncomfortable. She would not rearrange things to make him seem cleaner than he was. She would do exactly what she always did with every other subject. Let the story speak through what it had already shown. It sounded simple. In truth, it was one of the most decisive things she had ever done. She began editing Nathan not according to chronology, but according to emotional logic. A statement at the start of the film about transparency, placed against a corridor glance toward Mina. A line about trust in startup culture, followed by a shot of him leaning too close to her when he thought the camera had moved on. She did not underline anything, did not add dramatic music, did not force emphasis. She simply let the truth stand where it belonged. Anyone with eyes would see. During that process, Nathan came into her workroom a few times. He always asked the same question: "Is the project okay?" And Elara always answered almost the same way: "It's fine." Very clear. One time, he lingered behind her longer than usual. On the screen was a shot of him in a meeting, nothing dangerous. He braced a hand against the back of her chair. "Doesn't it feel weird to you?" he asked. "What does?" "That you're editing a film I'm in." Elara kept her eyes on the monitor. "You used to say I was good at keeping work separate from personal life." Nathan gave a faint smile. "I didn't think it would feel this strange." She asked, "Strange for who?" Nathan fell silent. She turned to look at him. "You should get some rest. You look exhausted." Nathan stared at her, and something almost like panic flashed across his face before disappearing. "What are you trying to say to me?" Elara shook her head. "Nothing yet." That word, "yet," haunted him over the next few days. She could tell. He became less natural, more careful with his phone, more prone to watching her when he thought she wouldn't notice. Sometimes Elara caught him standing in the doorway, wanting to come in and then stopping himself. They were living in the same apartment like two people who could both hear a clock counting down somewhere, but neither one would name when it was going to strike. The test screening took place on a Thursday night in a small screening room on the second floor of the post-production studio. There was enough space for the production team, a few potential investors, some of the people featured in the film, and a handful of distribution people. Not crowded, but crowded enough that no one could really hide if something became visible. Nathan arrived a little late. He was wearing the dark blue suit Elara had chosen for him 2 years earlier, the one he put on whenever he wanted to seem calmer than he really was. Mina came in with a different group, not with him. When Elara saw her at the back of the room, she did not feel jealousy, only a bitter kind of amusement at how polite betrayal could be. It even knew how to stagger entrances to keep from looking too obvious. Nathan sat down 2 seats away from Elara. He tipped his head toward her. "You okay?" "Yeah. You look pale. Didn't sleep much." He hesitated. "Are you nervous?" Elara shook her head. "No. Why not?" "Because everything is where it belongs now." Nathan smiled faintly, but his hand on his knee tightened. "You talk like I'm about to walk into a trial." Elara turned to him. "Only people who shouldn't hear it that way are afraid." Nathan stiffened at exactly the moment the lights went down. The film began. The first 10 minutes were all set up. Young faces, open office spaces, pressure, success, statements about the future, growth, risk. Nathan looked good on camera, confident, articulate, his body language bright and controlled. He knew how to speak into a lens. Elara had once admired that about him. Now she looked at his face on screen the way she looked at a structure that was both beautiful and hollow, something she had taken apart too carefully to believe in anymore. Then the details began to surface. Not obvious, not crude, just rhythm. One segment had Nathan saying, "In this environment, the only thing that keeps people together is trust." The next cut was the hallway shot at day's end, him and Mina standing too close. Then a different moment about transparency in leadership, followed by his sidelong glance toward her during a meeting. A brief touch at her back, a private smile that lasted just a little too long. Elara did not watch the screen much. She watched Nathan. At first, he only sat up straighter. Then his neck stiffened. At one shot, probably the first hallway clip, his hand froze on his knee. He did not turn, did not make any large movement. But Elara, who had once watched him in sleep, in pain, in fear, in joy, could read every shift in him as clearly as black type on white paper. Mina was at the far right end of the last row. Elara did not need to look at her to know she had understood too. Maybe only a few people in the room fully grasped the hidden chain of meaning, but the 2 people inside it definitely did. And that was what Elara wanted. Not spectacle, not humiliation, just truth placed in a space where it could not be undone with a private lie behind a closed door. When the lights came back on, the producer began talking about structure, about festival prospects, about initial reaction. People discussed things politely. Nathan did not say a word. He remained seated for a few seconds, then stood and looked at Elara for the first time since the screening began. "Come outside with me," he said quietly. Elara stood. "Okay." The hallway outside the screening room was empty. Yellow overhead light, a window at the end looking down on the parking lot. The muffled sounds from the room still reached them, as if from another world. Nathan turned on her quickly. "What the hell did you do?" It was the first time in years he had spoken to her in that tone. Elara looked at him, so calm even she could feel how unnatural it was. "I edited a film. Don't answer me like that. How do you want me to call it?" Nathan dragged a hand over his face. "You did that on purpose." Elara asked at once, "Did what?" Nathan choked on the trap. If he answered, he would be naming what he had seen. "You know what I'm talking about." "No, I want to hear you say it." Nathan stared at her, as if he were seeing for the first time how dangerous she could be. "Elara, this didn't have to turn into this." "Into what?" You stitched things together. You picked exactly those moments. The moments that happened." Nathan clenched his jaw. "You know what you were doing." Elara nodded. "Yeah." For the first time in a long time, I knew exactly what I was doing. Nathan lowered his voice and stepped closer. "This isn't how you deal with private things." Elara laughed, sharp and dry. "Private things? How exactly did you make it private?" "By doing it in a building full of cameras." Nathan stared at her. Anger and panic were fighting across his face, and Elara had never seen that expression on him before. "It's not what you think. That line should be engraved on the graves of cheating men." Nathan flinched as if slapped. "You're accusing me. You just said the word yourself." The silence that followed was enormous. Somewhere inside the screening room, someone laughed at some joke about distribution. Out in the hallway, 2 people stood facing each other inside separate climates. Nathan spoke first. "Let's go home and talk." Elara looked at him. "Okay." They said nothing on the drive back. No music, no glances. The city drifted past the windows like a film with no sound. Nathan drove too fast, and then suddenly too slow at every red light. As if he were trying to delay the moment they entered the place where there was nowhere left to hide. When they got home, Elara did not take her shoes off immediately. She stood in the living room and looked around the apartment she had lived in for 4 years with a strange new feeling. Same couch, same faint wood smell from the bookshelves, same standing lamp Nathan used to say was ugly and assembled for her anyway. Everything was the same, but she knew that in one evening, the place had become another space entirely. Nathan shut the door and turned. "What do you want to know?" Elara answered immediately. "Who?" Nathan went still. "Don't look at me like I'm speaking another language," she said, her voice flat. "Who?" Nathan exhaled hard, as if he had just been forced to lift something very heavy. "Mina." "How long?" He didn't answer. Elara repeated, slower this time. "How long?" "A few months." "How many?" Nathan pinched the bridge of his nose. "I don't know." Elara gave a soundless laugh. "You don't know? That's remarkable, because from what I saw, you seem to remember exactly where to touch, how to look, how to speak." Nathan looked up. "You don't have to do this." "Do what?" "Turn it into an autopsy." Elara looked at him for a long time. "Nathan, you picked up the knife first." That silenced him. After a while, Nathan said in a smaller voice, "It didn't start the way you think." Elara folded her arms and leaned against the dining table. Men who cheat always love starting with that line. It makes everything sound like an accident. It wasn't an accident. Then it was a choice. Nathan dropped his gaze. "Yeah." That one syllable landed quietly, but it had the weight of a metal door sealing shut. Elara didn't blink. "Are you in love with her?" Nathan stayed silent for a long time. "I don't know. Do you still love me?" He looked up then, and for the first time the pain on his face seemed real. That more than anything, almost made her lose control. Elara, it isn't that simple." "Exactly," she said. "It's much simpler than that. You just don't want it to sound simple." Nathan took a step toward her. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." "This far?" Elara repeated, still speaking softly. "Did you sleep with her?" Nathan did not answer. Elara nodded. "Got it." Nathan rushed to speak. "At least let me explain." "You already did." "No, you're only choosing the easiest parts to hate." Elara laughed then, really laughed, but it was so cold that Nathan flinched. "Do you realize that throughout this entire conversation, all you care about is how things sound, not what they are?" Nathan tightened his jaw. "I was wrong. Okay, I was wrong. I know that, but you can't just switch off like this. What am I supposed to do? Scream, throw things, cry in a way that would make you feel better? Because at least then, I'd still be loving you visibly." "Elara, no, listen to me." It was the first time her voice rose at all. Not a shout, but sharp enough to cut. "You betrayed me with your time, your attention, your body, and your words. You stood in this apartment, ate food I cooked, slept next to me, asked me if I was tired, then walked outside and gave someone else the thing you should have had the courage to tell me you could no longer hold on to. And now you're standing here angry because I'm not hurting in the right way for you." Nathan opened his mouth, then closed it. His face had gone white. "Elara, I never meant to lose you." She looked at him like a sentence arriving too late. "And yet you did everything required to make that happen." Nathan came one step closer. "I can end it. With her?" "Yes." "To keep me?" "Yes." Elara shook her head slowly. "That is the worst thing about you right now. You still think this is about choosing what to keep and what to throw away. Like I'm something you can negotiate for once the damage is managed." Nathan lifted a hand as if he wanted to touch her, but stopped in midair. "I panicked. I know. I did. I was wrong. You did not panic when it started. You panicked when you were seen." That sentence hit the center of everything. Nathan turned his face away, and that was the moment Elara knew she had said the truest thing in the room. Silence stretched on, for a long time, long enough that the refrigerator in the kitchen sounded like breathing. Finally, Nathan said, his voice breaking open, "I don't even know when it started anymore." Elara laughed quietly. "You do. You just prefer telling yourself it all happened too fast, so you can keep pretending you were innocent." Nathan sank into one of the dining chairs, both hands over his head. In that moment, he was no longer the man luminous in pitch rooms, no longer the founder people watched, just a man tired, cowardly, crushed under the weight of choices he had made himself. And strangely, painfully, Elara still hurt looking at him like that, not because she wanted to forgive him, but because love does not die at the exact same moment respect does. Some things die later. I think it was just, Nathan stopped, searching for the word. "Somewhere I could disappear for a while." "And what was I?" Elara asked. Nathan looked up, his eyes red. "Home." She closed her eyes for one brief second. When she opened them again, Her voice was colder. You don't get to call a place home if you keep bringing fire into it. Nathan began crying so quietly, he may not even have realized when it started. No sound, just tears coming too fast across the face of a man who had always known how to control his image. Elara stood still and watched, feeling like she was witnessing the final moments of someone she had once known, extremely well being taken apart layer by layer. He said brokenly, "I'm sorry." She said nothing. "I'm sorry." Still nothing. "Please say something." Elara asked, "What do you want me to say?" "Anything." She looked at him for a long time. "Fine, I'll say this. I think what hurts most isn't that you slept with someone else. It's not even the lies. It's that the whole time you let me keep living inside a reality you knew was fake. You looked at me every day and let me be the only person in the room who did not know what was happening. Do you understand how cruel that is?" Nathan had no answer, maybe because he understood. That night, they didn't sleep in the same room. Nathan stayed in the living room. Elara went into the bedroom, shut the door, and sat with her back against the bed until almost dawn. She didn't cry immediately. The pain didn't come like a wave. It seeped in like water through a wall, slow and total. She thought of the mornings he made coffee, the nights he fell asleep waiting for her export to finish, the times he called her home, in a voice that had truly sounded like he needed somewhere to return to. All of it had been real, and because it had once been real, it now had the power to wound her that much more deeply when dirty. The next morning, Nathan was standing at the bedroom door when she came out. His face looked hollowed out after only one night. "Do you want breakfast? I can go get something." "No." "Elara, can we keep talking?" "No." Nathan inhaled. "Are you going to work?" "Yes." "I'll drive you." "No need." "At least let me." Elara looked at him. "Just that." He stopped speaking. At the studio, everyone treated her normally. The director sent over a few new notes after the screening, mostly about pacing in the opening and the ending shape. No one asked her anything directly, but a few looks had changed. Maybe they had sensed something in the hallway the night before. Maybe Nathan's tension had been too visible on-screen. Maybe they knew nothing at all. It didn't matter. What mattered was that Elara sat in the edit room, watched the film again, and for the first time since this began, she no longer felt like she was taking revenge. She only felt that she had refused to be complicit. Nathan called 3 times, sent 5 texts. Elara answered none of them. When she got home that evening, he was still there. His hair uncombed, shirt wrinkled, eyes shadowed. A handwritten letter lay on the table. She glanced at it but did not touch it. "You can read it later," Nathan said, "or throw it away." Elara took off her shoes. "You're still here." The question hit him hard. "Where would I go?" She looked around the apartment. "I assumed you'd know." Nathan stepped toward her. "You want me to move out?" Elara set her keys down. "Do you think someone can betray another person and then keep living in the same space with them, as if there's still something left to negotiate?" Nathan went still. "I don't want to leave like this." She gave a small, bitter laugh. "You left a long time ago. I just stopped pretending not to see it." Nathan sat down in the chair, arms hanging uselessly. "Give me a few days." Elara thought for only a second. 2. He looked up. 2 days to get your things," she said. "Whatever's yours. Whatever we bought together stays. I don't want to divide this place like people dividing a crime scene." Nathan stared at her as if he wanted to say something, then gave up. "And her?" Elara asked suddenly. Nathan flinched. "What? Does she know you're asking me for 2 days to stay in our apartment?" Nathan closed his eyes in pain. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Turn me into something only contemptible." Elara looked at him, and for the first time in 2 days, her voice softened a fraction, not from sympathy, but from precision. "Nathan, you already did that yourself." The second night after the confrontation was the night Nathan packed. He did it slowly, as if time itself might be stretched by dragging the movements out. Elara sat in the workroom and listened to the sounds of him opening and closing doors. Hangers scraping across the closet bar, suitcase wheels rattling over the wooden floor. Every sound felt like a behind-the-scenes cut. She didn't want to watch, but was forced to hear. Sometimes he would stop at the doorway. "You probably don't want this shirt." "No." I copied the shared drive backups from the desk drawer. "Okay." I'm leaving the spare key on the shelf. "Okay." Every answer she gave was brief. Not to hurt him, just because anything more cost too much. When Nathan dragged the last suitcase to the front door, he stood there for a long time. At last, Elara stepped out into the living room. The apartment looked emptier in a very obvious way. Not because of the objects, because the rhythm of one person had been removed from the air. Nathan looked at her. "Is this really it?" Elara asked back, Do you think there's something unfinished? I can't have time to do what? To fix this. Elara shook her head. Some things are wrong at the level of structure. You don't fix them by patching the tear. Nathan gave a sad smile. You still talk like you're editing a film. Elara looked at him. Because I know once the spine of the story is broken, forcing it to stay only makes it deformed. Nathan put his hand on the doorknob. I wish I could go back. She stood still. I wish you'd never tried to live two lives at the same time. Nathan opened the door, then turned one last time. I love you. This time, Elara looked him straight in the eye and said the sentence she would later remember, not because it was cruel, but because it was exact. You may once have loved me, but love does not exist independently from the way a person behaves. If you betray me and still call it love, then what you love is the feeling of having me, not me. Nathan stood motionless. Then he nodded very slightly, like a man hearing the most accurate verdict ever passed on him. The door shut. Not hard, not theatrically, just one soft click, but the apartment changed completely after that sound. The weeks that followed were not easy in the way people often imagine. There was no instant relief, no cinematic standing in the room breathing freely at last. There were mornings Elara woke up before the alarm and, in the first half-second of consciousness, reached out to the other side of the bed before remembering. There were nights the elevator stopped on her floor and her body still lifted its head, expecting keys in the lock. There were moments she was editing, and some phrase Nathan used to say came back in exactly his cadence, exactly his breath, forcing her to stop because her chest hurt like something inside it had been squeezed too hard. But something else came too, just as slowly as pain, clarity. Once Nathan was no longer there every day, Elara began to see the whole path of the fracture. She remembered the delays in his smile, the phone turned face down, the late meetings, the I'm busy texts, the absent-minded hugs. Everything fell into a chain that could no longer be denied. What hurt most was no longer that he had betrayed her. It was that she had been standing in smoke for so long and still insisting on calling it myth. Tess was the first person she told the whole truth to. They met in a small wine bar on a Tuesday night. Tess listened to almost everything without interrupting, only pushing the water glass closer each time Elara paused too long over a sentence. When she finished, Elara laughed weakly. It sounds like a bad movie. Tess shook her head. No, a bad movie is one people rewrite, so nobody looks too ugly. Yours hurts because it's real. Elara looked down at the table. I don't know if I'm grieving him or the version of myself that believed him. Tess said very softly, both, and the second one usually lasts longer. A week later, Nathan emailed her. Not a text, not a call. The subject line only said, I won't push. Elara stared at his name in her inbox for a long time before opening it. The letter didn't defend much. Maybe finally, he understood defense was useless. He wrote that everything had started with long working nights, with the feeling of being seen inside a different version of himself. A version with less responsibility, less history, less weight, less expectation to be the place someone else leaned on. It was a confession that sounded both cowardly and true. He wrote that he had not dared tell Elara when he first began feeling tired, adrift, distant, because he was afraid of breaking the image he had of himself in her eyes, and that cowardice had opened the door to a parallel life. He wrote that what he had with Mina did not feel like love, but anesthesia. When Elara read that word, she had to stop because it made her feel sick. Anesthesia, so precise it was disgusting. The letter ended with, I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope that in your memory of me, I don't become completely fake. Elara read it, then shut the laptop. She never replied, but that sentence stayed with her, not because it saved anything, but because it touched the most difficult part of betrayal. The person who hurts you is rarely a total monster. They are usually some unbearable mixture of truth, weakness, cowardice, and sometimes real feeling. That mixture is what makes the pain impossible to sort into a simple category. If Nathan had been entirely bad, everything would have been easier. The documentary was finalized and locked for release. The suggestive cuts between Nathan and Mina remained, only sharpened slightly in pacing. No one asked that they be removed. No one named the real-life situation. But once the internal screenings circulated, rumors spread the way they always spread in that world. Nobody says it outright, but everybody knows enough. Mina left Nathan's company about a month later. Elara found out accidentally, overhearing the director mention it in a call with the producer. She didn't ask any more than that, not out of generosity, because she suddenly no longer wanted to spend even a minute of her life tracing the aftershocks of two people who had chosen what they chose. Nathan called her once after that, from an unknown number. Elara should not have answered, but it was almost midnight. She was exporting a backup file, and her body was too tired for her fingers to think first. Hello. 2 seconds of silence. Then Nathan's voice, very quiet. It's me. Elara closed her eyes. What do you want? I just wanted to hear your voice. You heard it. Don't hang up. Just a minute. Elara said nothing. The air conditioner in the room hummed steadily. Nathan inhaled. I saw Mina for the last time. Elara opened her eyes and looked at the export bar slowly moving across the screen. Why are you telling me that? I thought you should know. What for? So you'd know I'm not continuing it. Elara laughed. Nathan, do you still not understand? What I needed was never to know when you stopped. What I needed was to know why you started. And that's the question you still can't answer. The silence on the line was immense. When Nathan spoke again, his voice had thinned. I know. No, you don't. If you did, you wouldn't be calling me at this hour looking for a softer form of forgiveness. Nathan went quiet, then very softly, do you ever miss me? That question cut through her slowly, because yes, she did. Of course she did. She missed the version of Nathan from before everything had gone rot. She missed the man who fell asleep on the couch, waiting for her export to finish. The man who held her in the kitchen after losing money. The man who called her home in a voice that truly needed a place to return to. She missed that man. The one calling now was no longer entirely that person. Elara watched the export bar nearing 100%. I miss who I thought you were. I don't miss the man who did this. Nathan exhaled, as if all the air had been pulled from him. Yeah, don't call again. Okay, one beat. Elara, what? I really am sorry. She kept her hand on the mouse, eyes on the screen now fully exported. I know, but some apologies arrive after the part that could have been saved is already dead. Then she hung up. The season that followed passed strangely. Elara moved things around in the apartment. Not a full reinvention, not the scorched earth cleansing people always suggest. She just changed enough to stop the space from reflecting Nathan back at her from every corner. A chair, the sheets, the position of the bookshelf, the standing lamp moved from the left corner to the window. She did not destroy the apartment, because she refused to let Nathan's betrayal steal her sense of belonging inside a place where she had lived honestly. One late winter evening, Julian brought over pizza and sat on the floor the way Nathan used to. He fumbled through the first half hour, then finally got to the thing he had come to say. He really messed up. Elara laughed. Thank you for the nuanced analysis. Julian bit the inside of his cheek. I don't know where I'm supposed to stand without feeling awful. Elara looked at him. No one asked you to pick a side. It's not that. It's just, seeing you like this makes me feel sick for him. He lost more than he thought. Elara looked down at the slice in her hand. He didn't lose me in one night. He lost me through a series of small, repeated choices. That night was just when it became visible. Julian nodded, his eyes reddening a little as if even he was exhausted from watching a friend ruin the most valuable thing in his life. He's not okay. Elara was quiet for a second, then said, that isn't my job anymore. It sounded cold, but it was a sentence she had had to work very hard to learn how to say without shaking. Almost a year later, the documentary was selected for a small regional festival. Elara didn't chase congratulations. She only attended the main screening, sat in the back of the theater, and watched an audience react to a story they had no idea had once flowed through her life in such a private way. When the film reached the part where Nathan spoke about trust, then cut to the glance toward Mina, a few people in the audience gave a low laugh, not a laugh of amusement, but the sound people make when they recognize life's irony. Elara smiled too, very slightly. Not from satisfaction, not from revenge completed, just from a strange feeling. At last, everything was standing in the shape it had always deserved. After the screening, she stepped into the hallway to get her coat when someone said her name. Elara. She turned. Nathan stood at the far end of the hall, one hand in his coat pocket, thinner than before, his face stripped of the polished brightness that used to make people believe he could control everything. No suit, no founder's stride, just Nathan, more exposed, more worn, more real. Elara stood still for a few seconds. Why are you here? Nathan looked at her without avoiding her gaze. To see the film. A little late for that. Yeah. They stood there while people passed around them, and still the space around them felt strangely separate. Nathan looked down at the film poster, then back at her. It's good. I know. Nathan gave a faint, sad smile. Yeah, you do. Another silence. Elara, he said, and there was no request left in his voice now. I didn't come to ask for anything back. That's good. I just wanted to say one thing myself, something I wasn't decent enough to say right before. He paused. It wasn't the discovery that made what I did wrong. It was wrong from the first moment. I chose not to tell you the truth. Elara looked at him, not because the sentence was new, but because it was the first time he had said something that did not center his own feeling. Nathan continued, I used to think the worst part of this was losing you. Later I understood the worst part is knowing I became someone who could do that to you. The wind from the entrance drifted down the hallway. Elara pulled her coat a little tighter around herself. Are you done? He nodded. Yeah. She looked at him, then said slowly, I'm not angry the way I used to be. Nathan lifted his head slightly, and in his eyes something fragile flickered. But don't misunderstand me, Elara went on. Not being angry anymore doesn't mean there's a road back. It only means you no longer live in the center of my mind. Nathan smiled with something like sorrow. That sounds painful. Yeah, Elara said. It should. He nodded. You look different. How? More peaceful, but farther away. Elara looked at the stream of people moving beyond the glass doors. Maybe because I finally stopped carrying a false story through every day. Nathan lowered his head. I'm glad you got to that place. She didn't answer. Whether he was glad or not changed nothing now. Nathan stepped back. Goodbye, Elara. This time, hearing those two words didn't split her open the way it had the night he left with his suitcase. It only felt like the last door inside her quietly closing all the way. Goodbye, Nathan. He turned and walked away without looking back. Elara stood still for a few more seconds, then stepped out into the night air. The city looked like it did every evening. Cars, wind, lights spilling across wet pavement. She paused on the steps and drew in a long breath. Not the breath of someone who has won. Not even the breath of someone who has fully forgot. Just the breath of a person who understands that some chapters do not need to be erased to be over. They only need to be placed where they belong, in the past. When she got home, Elara turned on her computer. A new project was waiting. An empty timeline. A few scattered notes. She sat down, put on her headphones, and opened the first clips. A stranger's face on the screen. Another story. Nothing to do with Nathan. Nothing to do with betrayal. Just work. Just life continuing the way it always does. Before she began, she reached over and switched off the living room lamp, leaving the room lit only by the pale blue glow of the monitor. For one brief moment, she remembered the first night she had seen that hallway footage. The same kind of light, the same kind of truth she could not turn away from. The only difference was that on that night, she thought it might kill her. And now she was still here. Elara placed her hands on the keyboard. Her lips moved almost soundlessly. It's over. Not over because all the pain had disappeared. Not over because she had forgiven him, or because the past had somehow become beautiful again. Only over in the deepest and truest sense. That story no longer had the right to define her life. Then she pressed play,